Hi there, and welcome to the US Web Design System monthly call. And this is the monthly call for May of 2021. And for May, the USWDS logo has this late spring palette of green and blue, gold, pink, and moss. Slide 2. My name's Dan Williams, and I'm the USWDS product lead, and this is my avatar down at the bottom of the slide, which may or may not look like me. You make the call. Either way, thanks for being here on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. First, I'd like to mention that we're recording this monthly call, and as always, we post these recordings to YouTube. So please refrain from turning on your camera. We'll manually turn off any cameras to ensure the recording doesn't show us on camera. I'd also like to remind you that all attendees must abide by the TTS Code of Conduct, which is online at handbook.tts.gsa.gov/code of conduct. We've posted the link to the Code of Conduct in the chat. We'll be posting other links and references into the chat as we go along, and I encourage you to ask questions in the chat at any time. If any member of our team can answer your question in the chat, we'll do so. Otherwise, there'll be some time for questions and answers at the end of the hour. We're doing our best to keep to work toward month after month to keep the presentation time on the shorter side so that we have more time for questions at the end. So also be sure to introduce yourself in the chat as well. It's nice to know who's here, and it's good to have you here today, particularly on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. So thanks, and with that, let's get started. So to kick things off, quick little poll, not really necessarily directly accessibility related, but how well do you understand the Paperwork Reduction Act? Pop quiz. So answer 1, very well. I know what it says. I know how it applies to my work. Answer 2, somewhat well. I know where to look if I have questions, if I don't know an answer to something. Answer 3, a little. Kind of confuses me every time I think about it. And answer 4, not at all. What's the Paperwork Reduction Act? So if you're interested in answering this poll, give it a go. We're just interested to hear more from folks on the call. If you can't see the poll or can't access it for any reason, you can either put your answer in the chat or it's an unserious poll. So don't feel too bad about it. And we'll share out the results in just a minute. So I'll give a couple moments. Oh, look at that. Here we go. I see that the poll results are very much like the results inside my own head. Pretty much dominated by a little bit. Confuses me every time I think about it. This is good for us to know. I think we're trying to think about how best to think about Paperwork Reduction Act, particularly in the context of doing usability research, where it comes up as an issue a bit. And for those of you who are not at all familiar with the Paperwork Reduction Act, you can visit some of the resources on our website. We have links to the Paperwork Reduction Act site. That is there a paper? There's a paper. There's something. There are resources. We'll get them to you. But this is good for us to know, and thank you for sharing. So next, what are we doing today? So first, as always, we'll show off a few nice new site launches. Then we'll kick off our Global Accessibility Awareness Day program by talking with a few folks who are thinking about accessibility every day. And then I'll go into a bit of detail about how we approach accessibility here at the design system, how we think about accessibility and what we do to deliver accessible components and guidance, as well as what teams need to keep in mind to build accessibly with the design system. And I'll try to keep all this down to about 30 minutes or so. It should give us a good amount of time at the end for questions and feedback from you. So ask questions in the chat as we go, or hold on to your questions at the end, and we ought to have a good amount of time for that today. So Without any further ado, let's get into site launches. First up, AI.gov, the website of the National Artificial Intelligence Initiative. Its homepage shows that gleaming network of nodes with the words National Artificial Intelligence Initiative. On here's saferfederalworkforce.gov, a crisp documentation site for the Safer Federal Workforce Task Force. The site shows bright blues and reds on a photo of 2 employees wearing masks and the words, creating a safer federal workforce response to COVID-19. Next, iadrp.nia.nih.gov. This is the home of the International Alzheimer's and Related Dementias Research Portfolio. The homepage shows green button, a large search bar, and a full page image of neurons. Slide 9. Now, apprenticeship.gov, a site to connect apprentices and apprentice programs. This site shows a clean image for a modern conference room in gray text, in a gray text area that reads call for nominations. Slide 10. And finally, va.gov/accountability, the VA Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection. This page shows a sort of crisp, minimal, and professional field of blue below a VA header. The page reads Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection. Straight shooter. So great work. Again, everyone, thank you. And be sure to let us know when a new site launches, either with an email to USWDS@support.digitalgov.gov or a note on the USWDS public Slack channel. So today is Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and to help us understand a bit more about what accessibility means and how to think about it in our own work, I've asked a few folks who work in accessibility every day to come and share their perspective. Over the last week, our team was able to sit down with them and we put together this short video. So I'll show it to you now. This is brand new tech for us. So let's see if I can manage to show a video in my presentation. Thanks for agreeing to speak with our community on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I'd like to start by asking each of you to introduce yourself.
My name is Lisa Wilcox. I work for USDA Economic Research Service. I am the agency's lead designer, and I also handle 508, and I also take care of the UI UX for the website.
My name is John Sullivan. I'm with GSA's Office of Government-Wide Policy. We run the government-wide IT accessibility program. Our statutory charge is to work with the Access Board to provide technical assistance to executive branch agencies in implementing Section 508 programs, Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act.
Hi, I'm Randall Duchesneau, an accessibility specialist at the United States Access Board. I'm also a quadriplegic, a power wheelchair user, and I also use speech recognition software on the computer.
My name is Robert Jolly. I have he, him pronouns, and my role is a product manager for the public benefits portfolio within GSA's TTS 18F team, and I am the former Accessibility Guild co-lead for TTS.
What does accessibility mean to you?
Inclusion and usability for everyone.
Everyone having the ability to access information and use the various range of tools and technology regardless of ability.
Inclusion and equity of those with disabilities in all of our digital services, be they the federal workforce or consumers of our government information products and services.
I've always believed in the power of technology to be a force for equality and a force for good, and to just be a place where folks who have been traditionally shut out of society in one way or another to have a place to participate and to have full and equal access.
To me, accessibility means being able to live your life without limitations. It means going to the same places, doing the same things, and getting the same information as everyone else. When accessibility is done right, it's invisible. But when it's missing, it's an obvious barrier that brings unnecessary attention to one's disability.
What can someone new to accessibility do today to help embrace accessibility in their role or project?
Many of our accessibility-focused innovations and features allow us to deliver a lot more flexible experiences for a wider range of users, so not just those with disabilities. And so by remembering to improve the user experience for all customers, you're also making sure your services and products are more accessible.
Make sure that the documents and presentations they create are accessible. Use accessibility testing tools that are embedded in the Office products. Learn to walk in someone else's shoes. Watch a presentation with your monitor turned off. How much of it do you pick up? Watch a video with the sound down. Do you get it? Try to fill out a form without using your mouse. Can you do it with just your keyboard?
Learn about how people with disabilities use digital products, use the web, use applications in their devices, and then take that to heart with what they're designing or what they're building.
Experiencing what it's like to have a disability, even just for a day, can be transformative. Whether it's spending a day using a wheelchair or trying to use a computer with just screen reading software or speech recognition software or just a keyboard, it can really help you understand the challenges others face. I think this helps turn accessibility from something you have to check off on a list to something you can embrace and have a passion for.
What's the biggest challenge you hear from teams trying to build more accessible services?
I think the biggest challenge I hear is getting accessibility baked in from the start of a project. And it seems like unless you have a staunch ally for accessibility, sometimes it's forgotten until the end of development when you should be thinking about it at the beginning.
So there's definitely a lack of education and understanding about what all it takes to make a product accessible. All of the tools are there for folks, but it's often overwhelming for people to know what path to take or what to read or how much time they have to spend on things. So just trying to help folks have that foundational understanding so that then they can take those steps and take that journey through that product development and with accessibility as a lens, as a core component. Is something that everyone can do, but it just takes having that perspective.
Teams often have so many competing priorities and budgetary concerns. At times, accessibility may seem like just another requirement. So getting leadership to embrace accessibility and make it a priority from the beginning is critically important because it not only elevates it from being just another requirement, but allows you to plan for accessibility from the beginning, which makes the project easier to complete and may even reduce costs. It's a lot more expensive to try to retrofit something for accessibility and compliance.
The biggest challenge to building more accessible services is a misunderstanding of what accessibility testing and evaluation is like, when to get started, and that is accessibility is something that should be built in and done from the beginning, accessibility testing and checking, and not something you do at the end of a product and when you're about ready to launch the product. So start early, build in, understand the limitations of automated testing tools, understand the manual testing processes, and you'll be in good shape.
What would you like to say to folks interested in improving the accessibility of their products?
At the Access Board, we have some of the best accessibility experts in the nation. But we are also very fortunate to have a diverse workforce with many people with a variety of disabilities. So when we're working on a project, even though we have all this technical expertise, we'll still loop in staff with disabilities from other departments to get their feedback. We've gotten some great feedback from end users and have really been able to pivot the direction of our projects. We've not only ensured they were accessible, but we've been able to build in additional features, make it more intuitive and easier and more efficient for staff to do their jobs.
Take the time to learn about accessibility and how to build that into your practice. Get the proper training and gather resources and start to become an advocate for accessibility and evangelize it.
If you're really interested in improving the accessibility of your product, good. And that starts with understanding when you do it. You do it as early as possible in the design process. And during development, you use a mix of automated and manual tools. Understand the limitations of the automated tools. They are helpful, but you must do some manual testing along the way.
Just get started. There's a lot of benefit to be gained from making incremental improvements. So don't be afraid to just make those improvements and learn along the way.
So I just like to add, for any folks interested in improving the accessibility of their products, thank you. It makes a difference. And thank you to John, to Lisa, to Randall, and to Robert for making the time to talk with us. Really value your time and your expertise here. And we'll continue from the design system side to do our best to live up to what they ask of us, and to try to provide those resources, to be a conduit to those resources for accessibility needs. So, and that sort of leads, I guess, to what we'll be talking about now, to USWDS and accessibility, and how we help you create more inclusive federal websites. Slide 15. As we heard from our participants in the last segment, folks with experience in accessibility want us all to be thinking about accessibility from the start. We try to do that here at the design system, and what we do can help your teams think about accessibility from the start as well. In general, we build with accessibility in mind, so you can build with accessibility in mind too. I think that's one of the big benefits of using the design system. Slide 16. To say accessibility is to refer to a deep and complex subject that might be summarized as usability for all abilities. And more specifically and pointedly, as usability for those not served by majority solutions. It requires that our services do not discriminate by ability, nor by the specifics of necessary assistive technology. Building with accessibility in mind requires that we build not just for our own current abilities, not just for ourselves, nor exclusively for any simple majority, imagined or otherwise, but explicitly and intentionally for those who would be excluded by narrow majoritarian solutions. Slide 17. This, perhaps obviously, is critically important to people with permanent disabilities, but all of us will face temporary or situational disabilities throughout our lives. We will all get older, with aging's effect on hearing, vision, motor skills, and cognition. We may get injured, or we may just have to use our phones in bright sunlight with one hand while tired, or with a child constantly asking us questions. Usability isn't just for someone else. In other words, we may not use a wheelchair, but we may occasionally push a stroller. The reality of contextual ability is just part of the reason that accessibility concerns should be all of our concern. The electronic curb cut effect. To make changes that benefit accessibility are critically important for those who need it, but are also better for everyone who use a product. And finally, especially with government services, we're designing for when things are important, required, stressful, emotional, meaningful, complicated, and tough. We're not typically designing for best case scenarios. Slide 18. So Section 508 and WCAG. Today, when we think practically about accessibility in digital services, we think about the requirements of Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which was amended in 1998 to require federal agencies to make their electronic and information technology accessible to people with disabilities. And we think about the requirements of WCAG, or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which are an evolving set of requirements now in version 2.1. These requirements are related. Section 508 incorporates by reference the WCAG 2.0 level AA success criteria. Slide 19. The goal of both of these requirements is to provide services that are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Perceivable. Users must be able to perceive the information presented. Operable. Users must be able to operate the interface. Understandable. Users must be able to understand both how the user interface operates and the meaning of information presented. And robust. Users must be able to access the content as technologies advance. As technologies like browsers and other assistive technology evolve, the content should remain accessible. Slide 20. What needs do requirements like Section 508 and WCAG address? Now, to speak very broadly about current requirements like Section 508 and WCAG, it's that they require considering the needs of a few specific user types, needs that the design system builds into our design language, into our components, into our guidance, and into our layouts. Slide 21 requires us to think about the needs of blind users, that we support screen readers and assistive technology, like a Braille display. Outline semantic landmarks and regions in the components and layouts that we build. Assure all content has clear context and labeling. Provide accurate text equivalents for visual resources. Announce updates of page state changes, and to avoid visual exclusive meaningful functionality. We're also thinking about limited vision users, and this includes things like color blindness or times when you might have a limited field of vision available. We want to be designing for readability. We want to be designing generous, forgiving interaction targets. We want to allow layouts to respond to user scaling settings in their browser or to screen magnifiers, which will magnify certain sections of the screen that are controlled by a pointer or mouse. We want to prefer linear layouts. We want to keep things simple in layouts so that a user doesn't have to move around a screen to get a sense of the information that the page is presenting. We don't want to rely on hover for critical information. We want to use legible visual contrast. And we want to avoid color exclusive meaningful functionality. You don't want to ever convey a meaningful difference between just having red or green be the thing that conveys a meaningful difference if someone is has a color blindness. For deaf users, we want to be providing accurate text equivalent for audio resources. We want to avoid audio exclusive meaningful functionality. If something happens and it only gives you a beep to tell you that it's going wrong, then it's not enough. Slide 24, limited mobility users. And we want to be supporting keyboard only, like a certain linear functionality and the conventions of using just the keyboard. Similarly, we want to be supporting touchscreen or direct input functionality and the conventions related to touch. This is perhaps obviously deeply related to mobile experience, but it is very meaningful to limited mobility users as well. We want to be designing generous readability and interaction targets, again, preferring linear layouts, and again, not relying on hover for critical information. Slide 25. We're also thinking about sensory sensitive users by trying to keep things simple. reducing the amount of sort of noise on a page. We want to be avoiding flashing and repetitive animations, avoiding very high contrast, avoiding alarming colors and images, and avoiding things like audio and video that start automatically. Slide 26. So I should note that this is not a comprehensive list and that real life users may fall into multiple categories. For instance, limited vision users may use screen readers in addition to screen magnifiers. And we also know that cognitive differences and neurodiversity are becoming more and more of an accessibility focus as well. Accessibility requirements may be relatively static, but accessibility itself is as dynamic and open-ended as any design process. Slide 27. So what does the design system do to support accessible products? We deliver individual components that are built to conform to WCAG 2.1 and thus also to WCAG 2.0 and thus also to Section 508. We provide guidance on how to implement those components accessibly. There's an accessibility part to the guidance section of every one of our components. So we try to do the best job we can of talking about what is critical to accessibility in a component and what you need to think about when integrating that component into a layout. And we include accessibility-focused tools to build new functionality. We feature sort of smart and context-aware settings that allow accessible customization with minimal custom code. And we make accessibility one of our core design principles. We'll dig into these a little bit more. So slide 28. We deliver individual components that are built to conform to WCAG 2.1. In general, the big thing that is important to us, like if it isn't accessible, if it doesn't conform, it won't ship. And we test with screen readers to help do this. We test with VoiceOver on the Mac, and we test with NVDA on Windows. We test with keyboard only. We test with touch only. We test across browsers and operating systems. Slide 29. We're also always collecting community feedback as we develop a component. So we're looking for others' experience with these components as we go through the research and design phase. So we're hearing if there are some considerations that we might not have considered as we're putting a component together. We're also scanning. We're doing the automated testing that is great to have, but not sufficient. We scan with automated tools like Pally and Axe on every code change in our code base. We have this set up in our continuous integration with GitHub and with CircleCI, so that when we are pushing changes onto GitHub, these scans are happening and the actual code cannot be merged unless these checks pass. And then we're also manually testing functionality with the trusted tester. Slide 30. So we're providing guidance on how to implement those components accessibly. As I'd mentioned, like an important part of any components page is the accessibility section, which outlines what we're doing in that component to usually with regards to something like ARIA that help the component be more accessible, and what you might have to consider or change as you put this component into production or as you put it into a layout. Slide 31. We include accessibility-focused tools to build new functionality. Because part of what the design system is here to do is not just to provide the default components that we do have, but to build new things. The design language that we ship with the design system is built for building. So we want to be sure that we build tools into the design language and into the process of compiling that work to help keep accessibility in mind. So this is where something like our color tokens with magic number contrast come in. So won't get into it in a lot of depth here, but one of the reasons we have color tokens set up the way we do, given grades from 0 to 100, is so that you can see with any color combination whether it passes a certain level of accessible contrast. So if something has a difference, if two colors have a grade difference of 50, they will pass AA contrast. And that, it makes that system of color contrast a lot simpler, and it means that you don't always have to rely on big tables or grids to see, yes, this shade of blue works with this shade of dark blue. You can just go by the grade itself. We also have REM-based font size tokens and an M-based media query mix-in that respond to user scale settings. So one of the reasons we use REMs in our type scale, and one of the reasons we use Ms for media queries is that that way of doing it makes the site more able to adjust to a user's browser settings for scale. And as you scale a site's size up and down, make sure that the type is scaling adequately and the media queries are hitting as they should. And we also use normalized typography tokens that provide reliable, readable results regardless of the typeface. So that if your designs are moving from typeface A to typeface B to typeface C, you are relatively assured with font normalization that you're not going to move from a typeface that is the right size and legible in one face to one that is much too small when you make that change. Slide 32. And so we feature smart settings that allow accessible customization with minimal custom code. So these are the things that we've been trying to do in more recent versions of the design system, where we're adding more context-aware components that can change their color based on a background. So they'll know enough through a setting to know whether they should be showing sort of dark text in that component or lighter text, and to update both the text and the links appropriately. And so these settings are similar for links to let you choose accessible link and hover states sort of automatically. And so the site will build and will adapt to your background color. And if it finds that it can't choose a good accessible combination, you will get a warning when the site's CSS compiles. Slide 33. And I think perhaps most importantly, we make and have made accessibility one of our core design principles. That this is not only part of our mission to embrace accessibility in our own work, which is very important, but to do what we can to encourage it in other projects. Like it's part of our general design principles, not just because it's a good idea for us and it's a great idea for us, but because we know that it is critically important to embrace accessibility in any project. And it's something we put a lot of effort into both doing and into evangelizing. And we prioritize accessibility issues because while we do our best to do all of this testing, to keep all of these things in mind, there are always things that we could do better. We learn something. We're always trying to learn. And we really work hard to fix accessibility related issues quickly and to get them into the next available release. So I think it's important to know that if you find something, if you find an accessibility related issue and you bring it to our attention, like this, this is not something that's going to sit in the backlog for ages, or we really intend it not to sit in the backlog for ages. These are issues that we intend to elevate and to fix as soon as possible. Accessibility is a mission critical service for the design system, and we want to know where there's an opportunity to fix something that's broken or to improve something that could be better. Slide 34. But our accessibility work, what we do, only gets your product part of the way there. Designing with USWDS is a great way to incorporate accessibility early, as we heard, is an important thing. But what you build with the design system and how you compose that work is just as important. Just as you could build a completely impractical kitchen from perfectly acceptable constituent parts, we provide a great countertop, but you made it 8 feet tall, so it still doesn't work. The most important part of your own accessibility is in the holistic experience of what you're building. In fact, the most recent drafts of WCAG 3.0, which is the probable, likely, inevitable perhaps, successor to WCAG 2.1, makes a distinction between atomic tests, which are the mostly automated tests that test each section of your site against specific criteria, similar to WCAG 2.1, and holistic tests, which are closer to standard usability testing and human-centered design. WCAG 3 begins to have a different way of talking about the results of your accessibility testing, which puts appropriate focus on automated testing, but puts even more of focus on this kind of holistic testing of the service as you build it. But regardless of the methodology in WCAG, it's important to recognize that building with accessible components does not guarantee an accessible service. And we recommend a mix, like we do for the design system, a mix of automated, semi-automated, and manual testing, in addition to actual tests with real people who need assistive accommodations to interact with services effectively. Slide 35. So today, we published a new page on our website that collects accessibility resources and outlines what both the design system and its users need to do to better embrace accessibility from start to finish in every development cycle. If you're here on this call, a lot of the things on that page will be very familiar. And we plan to add more resources to this section as well, such as collecting past, current, and upcoming accessibility improvements on this page, so you can see what we're working on and what we've addressed as the design system has evolved. Slide 36. So all of this is in the service of what we hope the design system can do for any project. Make the technical requirements part of the solution from the start, so you can really focus on the key stuff, like user testing, great content, and clear organization, all resulting in simple, straightforward services. Slide 37. So thank you for joining us on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And let's do what we can to let technology enable participation and not frustrate it.